I've wired up my lights today in parallel, so I have 6 lights in total that are in pairs. So I have 3 lights on each side that are all going to go on the ceiling. So I've done some joints by soldering them. So I'll show you how I've done that. I've saved one so that I can show you my mediocre soldering skills and the materials that I've used for that. So I'll show you now what the parallel wiring system looks like on my one. I've laid it out on the ground to show you now, so here you go. This is how they're going to appear in my camper van. So I've got the first 2 here, and we have the connectors that you might have seen in my previous video. So those are connecting, and then I've soldered 2 joints so that these 2 cables can come down to the next LED light there, which is the same setup of the connector, and then another soldered joint so that goes down to the 3rd one on this side. So that's that whole side there, and then obviously this one goes across, and then we've got the same layout all the way down here again. And then on the 3rd one on this side, we've got this cable. I've left this one because I'm going to do some soldering, and I'll show you how I do the soldering on this one here, with this cable here that's going to lead to my power source, which will be my fuse board that goes to my battery. So that's this big long cable here. So I'm going to show you how I do my soldering. I'm not the best at soldering, but I can show you the basics anyway, and I'll show you how I solder up this joint. So this is the last part of my parallel wiring of lighting, and these are the bits that I'm using just now to do my last joining of these 3 cables. So basically we've got this one here that's coming from the previous light, this one here going to the last light, and this one here that will be going to the power source, i.e. the battery. So we need to join all 3 of these together in order for that circuit to be complete. So we have some solder, some insulation tape, some flux which cleans any oxidization on the soldering iron and the wire that we're going to be soldering. I have some shrink tubing that will be going over the cables so that I can pull that over the solder joint and make it so that it's insulated. I have the wire strippers, which I've already used. I've shown you before about stripping wires, and some pliers to cut any wire off if it's too long. And I have the soldering iron here, so I'm going to show you now how I solder this little T-junction. So the first thing that I would do is to just squeeze these together a little bit and feed each wire through, maybe a twist, feed the wire through the shrink tubing on all 3 of these cables, and then once it's all finished I can pull those up and shrink them around, making it all safe. There we go, so that's all 3 of those on. And then what I'm going to do is slightly splay the wire that goes to the light and the wire that comes from the previous light. I'm going to splay them out a touch, just like this, because I'm going to push them together like this and then twist them. But first I want to dip them in my flux. There's quite a bit on there. I didn't get a brush, so I'm just going to spread that on, and then I can wipe off any excess. And then I'm also going to put some on the tips of this cable as well, which is the one that goes to the longer lead That's going to go off to my battery supply. So I'll spread that out, I'll wipe off the excess. So here's the two pieces that I'm going to join together first, just by pushing them in together like that, so they're nicely spliced, and then just a little twist to make sure that they don't go anywhere. And then the third wire, I'm going to splay it out a little bit like this, and then just fold it over the top and then twist it back round. So that's holding together on its own quite nicely. But if I was to pull that, it would just pull straight apart. So I'm going to use some solder, and I'm going to dip it in my flux just to clean up any oxidization on the tip. And then this makes sure that the solder sticks nicely as well. So I'm going to heat up my solder and hold it onto the metal. And you can hear the flux crackling a little bit, and this is what's helping the solder to stick to the copper wiring. And then we can make sure it's fairly nice and smooth. You have to heat the copper wiring up in order for the solder to stick to it as well. It's not a bad joint already, so I'm going to turn it over and have a look at the other side. So this is what the other side looks like. So as you can see, there's no solder on this side, so we're going to do the same process on this side, and I'll heat the solder up and the copper wiring, and when it reaches the right temperature it should all stick together nicely. And the flux is definitely key to this. I was trying to do this yesterday without any flux, and all that happened was the solder made bubbles, and it made like tiny little balls of solder, and it just rolled straight off the metal. So I would definitely recommend buying yourself a little pot of flux. You can get it quite cheaply from some hardware stores, particularly I got mine from Screwfix, so they're good. So there we go, that's my soldered joint. I'm sure there might be people out there that are very experienced in soldering that might well be screaming out to me how I might have done some of this wrong, but this is all I know, and I think it's going to be good enough. It's a good tight joint now, so if I was to pull this, it's not going anywhere. These cables are nice and tight. Do get in touch with me if you think that I should be doing something very different here, but I think I'm right. So I'm going to pull my shrink tubing back up over here, and then that basically covers these joints really nicely. I've got the third one here, and then I like to just run the soldering iron over the tubing all the way around, and that shrinks it down, as you can see. Don't hold it in one place for too long because it will just burn it, and you don't want that. There we go, that's one done. And then you can just make sure it's pushed nice and tightly as far as it will go, And then what I'm going to do is to put some insulation tape around the piece right in the middle here. But now we have a nice secure T-joint with 3 cables all going into one. And this completes my circuit for my 6 lights, so I can now wire this into my fuse board, which will go down to my battery, and then we can check and see if these lights all light up. I'm hoping so. So I'm going to check that before I thread them all around on the ceiling, and then if there is any issues we can work out what it is. So there we go, that's all done. So you can see it's all nice and secure there. And then I have my piece of insulation tape here, and what I've actually done is cut it down the middle halfway so that I can focus a little piece around there like this. I just find it easier being a bit thinner. And then wrap it around, and then we have this little bit here as well, and I can wrap that around the back there and just make sure that it's all nicely covered up and make it all nice and tight. I can probably just cut off this excess piece, it's not needed. I'll grab my scissors, just give that a little snip, smooth that down, and there we have it. Turn it over, check the other side, make sure it's all nice and sealed in. You don't want any bits of metal or wire sticking out. I might just use that last little piece that I cut off to go around this bottom part here. And maybe not, it's not sticking. So I've just cut a new piece just to go around this bottom part, just to make sure that that's nice and secure. Okay, so that's my T-junction